Hi everyone, this is Raj and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, you will learn how to build backend using Python and FastAPI. Yes, we are going to use FastAPI because it is asynchronous. In this video, we will build backend using Python, FastAPI. We will use MySQL, SQLAlchemy for our ORM, Alembic to migrate the database, JWT to authenticate users' request. We will build two models, user and bookmark. We will have our own user management where we will register a user and log in the user with the registered information. Then we will create a bookmark, get all bookmark, get bookmark by ID and delete bookmark. Finally, we will have a sort code. This sort code will be assigned to each bookmarked URL, and then you can, when you provide that sort code, you will redirect it to original URL, and we will count the number of visits as well. So let's look into the working first. We will have a health route. When you hit that, you will get the message that everything is working fine. Then you will have register route where you can register a new user. As you can see here, we are taking care of the case where the user is already registered. Then we will log in using the registered information and you will get access token. We will use this access token to authenticate our request for bookmark route. We will create a bookmark, get bookmark by ID. If the bookmark ID is not valid, it will say bookmark not found, and we can get the bookmark by ID like this. Finally, we can delete the bookmark as well. So this is what we are going to build, and this video is going to be long. So grab a coffee and let's start working on the code itself. So the first thing I will do is I will create a new virtual environment using venv. You can use conda or virtual env as well. Then I will source or activate the virtual environment. This command can be different for your operating system, and I'll check if the virtual environment is okay or not. You can see the virtual environment is okay. Now I will install FastAPI and UVCon. FastAPI to build our server and UVCon to run our server. Before I move forward into the tutorial, I would like to mention a thing that I assume that you have some knowledge of web server. If you don't have any knowledge about web server, I suggest you should first, take a look into how web server works or what are different things associated with web server, and then come back and watch and build this application. So we will install these things. My bad, it is pip install. Meanwhile, I'll create few folders. First, src, all the code will reside into this src. Then I'll create a run.py. This run.py will be our entry point. In this src folder, I'll create main.py. This main.py will hold our FastAPI application. So here I'll say from FastAPI, let me very quickly refresh my virtual environment so that I can get autocomplete. FastAPI, and I'll create a new app using the FastAPI class. I'll say my title is, let's say, bookmark URL shortener API. Let's say my version is v0. Let's say I'll provide description. This is a URL shortener application developed using Python and FastAPI. Okay. I'll create my first route, app.get. That will be home route. I'll give a tag. This tag is useful when we create a documentation like this. Okay. So this is the documentation that we are going to build. So this v0 is coming from the version we provided when we created the object of the FastAPI class. This is the description and this is the title. You can see we have authentication, bookmark, redirect and health. So this authentication is the tag we have used. Okay, and all the schemas, we will build all the schemas as well using Pydantic. So this thing goes into the documentation, and I'll say my tag is health. Okay, and here now what I'll do is that I'll create asynchronous function. So let's understand what I mean by asynchronous. So let's say you have this route. Synchronous means that when a request comes on this route is busy and it is only be freed after the request is responded. But asynchronous means when a new message comes on, or the new request basically comes on this route, it runs a coroutine basically in the background and frees or basically free this route so that it can take another request. So that is why we are using asynchronous, so that our application can take multiple concurrent requests. Here I'll say asynchronous def and let's say health. Here I'll return an object with a message like welcome to the bookmark URL shortener API. Okay, and let's save this. Now there are different ways of running FastAPI application. One of the simplest and most efficient way is to create a run.py and import uvcon into that, and then I'll say if the name equals to __ main __, then I want to run an application. It will take argument app. This app argument means provide me the path where your FastAPI application is. So in our case it is inside src main, and provide me the app name or the variable name that holds FastAPI app. So in our case it is inside src main, and the app name or the variable that holds this app is app. So that's why I'll say app equals to src.main colon app. Then the host is 127.0.0.1. The port I want to use is 5000, and I want to reload the server whenever I make change into the root directory. Now what I'll do is that I'll say python run.py, and it says address already in use, and that is because I was using it here. So I'll stop this, and if I come here again and if I run this thing, you'll see we have our server running. And if I click on this, you'll see that we got the message, welcome to the bookmark URL shortener API. So this thing works well. Now let's move into further development of this application. I'll minimize this for the time being, and let's create few folders. First, routes. So all the routes of our backend will go into this. Models, all the models go into this. Then I'll create another folder, schemas. All the schemas, Pydantic schemas will go into this. Finally, I'll create utils folder. All the utility related functions will go in this, and let's say database.py, my database connection will go into this file, and finally config.py, my configuration will go into this. So let's start building our models. So I'll create user.py. Our user model will go into this, and for that we need to install few things. I'll clear this and I'll say pip install SQLAlchemy and hit enter. Okay, so it is now installed. Let's create our user model. So what I'll do is that from SQLAlchemy, import the column, import string, boolean. From SQLAlchemy dot dialects dot MySQL, import var char, because this is different for different SQL, like for Postgres SQL it's different, for MySQL it's different. So we need to import it from that particular dialect, and then SQLAlchemy.orm import declarative base. Okay, so we will use these things. Now I'll say class user base that will inherit everything from declarative base and does nothing. And now I'll create the real user model that will inherit the user base and basically then inherits the declarative base. Here I'll provide a table name that is users. It will take few things, ID and other things. Let's revisit our initial things. So ID, username, email, password created at and is active. So let's very quickly do that. So ID will be a column that will type of varchar, and let's say 512. It will be my primary key, true. The default value I want to use UUID. So for that, let's do one thing. Here I'll create utils.py, and here I'll import UUID from Python, and I'll say def generate underscore UUID. It will take nothing and return a string, and we will return a string form of UUID version 4. Here you need to understand one thing. If a function that is going to take time, then you need to make that function asynchronous and await all the operation, so that our asynchronous thing can work all over the application. But this function basically is not going to take time. It's in real time, so I'm not going to make it asynchronous. So here I'll say generate UUID, and let me import it. Okay. Now let's say my email will be of column string, and let's say with a length of 128, unique equals to true, index equals to true, username will again be kind of a string, and let's say 56, unique equals to true, and index equals to true. Hashed password, we are going to hash the user's password for security purpose, and that's a kind of a standard thing. That's a string, and I'll use a bigger number, no other arguments. Let's say is underscore active equals to column kind of boolean, and default is true. Okay, so these are the few things that will go into the user model. The same way we will create our bookmark model. Now I will not write all the code, but I will just paste few code that we are going to use, and don't worry, I'll explain everything. So it is the same we have used in the user model. There are few differences though. First, we are creating the bookmark base. This is going to help us migrate the database. Then we will create a bookmark class itself, table name, ID, original URL, sort code, visit count. Okay, sort code is a column of type string, visit count is a type integer, and we will take default 0 created at, I haven't take this into user model, I'll add that, and user ID. Now you need to understand this user ID is coming from user model, and we have written like it's a foreign key, and the foreign key is user.id. There is one more interesting thing here, is we are going to index bookmarked original URL, okay, so that whenever we want to retrieve it, we can very easily retrieve that thing. So consider indexing a column is like a useful thing when you want to retrieve that thing. So whenever you want a column that you need every now and then you will index that column. So this is how our bookmark table look like, and let me add and I will import these things, not from here, from date time, and I will import from SQLAlchemy.SQL import func. Okay, so this will create our user and bookmark. Now the usual practice is to create database and create tables manually by calling SQLAlchemy, or directly using MySQL connection or any other way, whatever you have used as your SQL. But we are not going to use that. We are going to use Alembic, and that will help us migrate the database very easily. So what I'll do is that pip install Alembic. Meanwhile, let me open my MySQL. You can read more about Alembic on their official website, and I suggest you should look into the documentation first if you want to learn more about Alembic. Now here what I'll do is that I'll create a new database called bookmark underscore shortener. Okay, and I'll create the database. Now the database is created and Alembic is installed in our virtual environment. What I'll do is that I'll initialize Alembic. For that I'll say Alembic init, and here you can use any placeholder that can be identified that this is particular Alembic thing. So for that I'll say Alembic itself. You can give another name as well, and when I hit enter, it will do two things. First, it will create a folder called Alembic, and it will create another file called alembic.ini, and here you'll see there are a few things, but the important thing is on line 66. This is where we will write our database URL. Here under env.py file, there is target metadata. So we will add our target models metadata. So we have two models. We will import the user base. This is where the user base will come into help. So what we'll do here is that I'll say user base dot metadata. So basically this thing will tell Alembic to create how many columns and what are the different data types of the column. Now this thing is done. So we have initialized Alembic. We have edited our env.py file. Now we need to add our SQLAlchemy URL, and for that what we will do is that we will write a string. So we will say MySQL. This is our database type. Then our dialect will be PY_MySQL. Then I'll say : // my username is Logan. My password is password in my localhost @localhost 3306 is my port number, and my database name is bookmark_shortener. Okay, make sure you write the correct database name. Okay, the same we have used to create our database. Let me make sure it is correct, and when you save it, you need to run 2 more commands so that Alembic can migrate our database structure into MySQL. So I'll say Alembic revision -- auto generate -m, let's say first commit, and when I hit enter, it says no module name utils. Yeah, because instead of doing that, I'll say src and I'll save this. Yeah, I'll run that again. It says can't, yeah, because we haven't installed all the packages needed for that. So I'll say pip install PyMySQL. I'll hit enter. Now I'll run the Alembic command one more time, hopefully. It says, yeah, so it says MySQL is not installed as well. For that, I'll say pip install AI MySQL. So we are going to use asynchronous version of MySQL. I'll hit enter. Let me freeze the packages into requirements.txt file and I'll hit enter. Let me clear it again and let's run Alembic. It says SQL dialects MySQL PyMySQL. Maybe there is some mistake by me. MySQL PyMySQL. Let me figure it out very quickly. Oh, I guess I figured out now. So when I run this, it still says unknown database bookmark shortener. Okay, I'm not sure what was the issue, but I solved it by removing the database and then creating the database again. Once I did that, it worked well. So now we have, if you look into Alembic under versions and this file, you will see that there is a revision that is created when we run this command. Okay, and this revision is going to create these things, create table with these columns, and this is a primary key, and then create indexes for email and username, then create another table with these columns, one foreign key and one primary key, and create these indexes. So in order to finally make the changes available into the database, what we'll do is that I'll say Alembic upgrade and then head, and when we run this, you'll see that this has ran the upgrade and it has actually created all the things. So when I refresh this and when we look here, you will see that bookmarks table is there, though there is no information, and users table is there, though there is no information. So both the tables are successfully created, and this is the power of migration. So you don't have to manually do anything. In case, let's say you change or add anything here, what you need to do is that you need to follow the same step and do the revision. Now at that time there will be changes. For example, added this column, okay, like added this column, but that column is not present into the existing rows. So what you need to do is that you need to provide information here in the revision file that do this thing with the existing rows, and it will handle that. So we have successfully created our model into database. Now let's look into how to create different routes. So here I'll create first auth.py. That will be our auth route, then bookmarks.py, that will be our bookmarks route. Finally, redirects.py, this will be our redirect route. Let's first work into the authentication so that we can make sure everything works, and then we will move into bookmarks part. So here what I'll do is that from FastAPI I'll import API router, then I'll import depends, I'll import HTTP exceptions, and I'll import status codes. The first thing I'll do is that my router will be my API router. It will take few things. Let's say a prefix, I'll say auth, and tags, I'll say authentication. Now let's provide some routes here. So when I say router dot post, the first route is register. This will have a response model. This response model is a kind of a thing that we are going to return whenever we return a response. At this point I'll say none, and I'll create async function called register user. Now this will again take bunch of information. The first thing, it will take a user. This user is, let's consider this as when you send a request on a route and send a body, FastAPI will convert that body into this user object. So we will create that, but at this point I'll say none. Then obviously in order to register the user and do all the things, we will need database as well. At this point I'll say none. Okay, and then what we'll do, I'll write some to do things. Okay, the first thing, we'll check if the user exists, check if the email is already registered, otherwise we will create a new user. Okay, create a new user. Okay, and then send the response. So you can see we need two things basically, user and DB. So let's very quickly create all our schemas. So under schemas, I'll create one file user.py and another file bookmark.py. These two files will hold our schemas. So instead of writing those things, because those are just Pydantic models, let me remove this, we don't need it. So it says we have a user base that will email and username. When we want to create a user, it will take password. When we want to log in a user, we will use this schema. When we send user as a response, we will use these two things, and other things from the attributes of the model. Then when we want to send a token, we will use this thing, and when we want to take the token data, we will use these thing. and these all things will make sense once we move further into the development. Then I'll say bookmark base. This is my base class. Then bookmark create will take all the things from bookmark base, and bookmark response will do send these things, and it will take all the other parameters from the configuration of the model itself. So we have created our user and bookmark schemas that we will need. Now let's work into database.py file so that we can have our database connection. So I'll say from SQLAlchemy.extension.async.io import create async engine, and we'll take async session. Okay. Then from SQLAlchemy.orm import session maker. This will be needed to create a session. Now here we will need our sensitive database information. So for that, instead of writing them here hard coded, what I'll do is that I'll create a new file .env, and in this .env file I'll paste some information. So db username, db password, db host, and db name. Let me make sure that the db name is the one we are using. I guess I have written an E extra, but I'll go with this. So these are the things, and in order to read these things from .env file, I'll install a package called pip install python-env. Let's freeze the requirements.txt file again. Now in the configuration file, I'll say import os from .env import load.env and find.env, and I'll say load.env find.env, and this will find the .env file, and here I'll very quickly load these information. So we are reading database username from .env, password, host, and db name. This will help us create our database URL. So here I'll paste few amount of code very quickly so that you don't have to see me write it. What we are doing is that from src configuration, we are reading all this information, which is basically coming from this .env file. Then we will create SQLAlchemy URL. We are using MySQL and asynchronous MySQL package. Our DB username, password @host, and we can use port as well. But since the port is kind of a fixed thing, I'm not going to use that. But in case you have different port, then you can use that. And finally, our DB name. Now here we will create an engine. We pass our database URL. Then we will create asynchronous session using session maker, and it will take engine class. This async session expires on commit false, auto commit false, and auto false flush false. Finally, this asynchronous def get db function yields session. That means it returns a session whenever we call this function. Okay, so let me save this. Now if we come here under auth route, and we will solve all these problems. The first thing, we will say that the response will be user response model, and that we will import from the schemas, and I'll say not schemas but src.schemas. Then the user that we receive from the request is user create. Obviously it is coming from the schema as well. Then the DB. Now this DB is, asynchronous session coming from SQLAlchemy. So for that I'll say SQLAlchemy dot extension dot async IO import async session. Now we will receive this asynchronous session into this function. But how? So here the advantages of FastAPI comes into the picture. So what we are saying that this DB is my asynchronous session, and it depends on a function called getDB, which is coming from src import database, or I'll say so that means whenever a new request comes here, first pass the request body into this user create so that I can have a model. Then call getDB so that I can have my DB as well. Okay. So now let's, do all our to-dos. So let's say a result will be db dot execute select user and filter filter what I want to filter, user name equals to user dot user name. So what this means is that select a user where model's username equals to the username of the user which is into the body. So let's import all of these things. So what I'll do is that from SQLAlchemy dot future import select. Okay, I hope that, and also here I need to import the user as well. Not this user, my bad. From src.models.user import the user. I hope this makes sense now. We are executing a statement like select all from user where user.name equals to the username we have provided. Okay, and since this is asynchronous function, I will write await here and we will take the result. And once we execute the statement, we will get db user by username, and that will be result dot scalar, and I'll say first. Okay, so we will get our user here. Now if I check if db user by username is not equal to none, I'll raise an exception. That will be our HTTP exception, and it will take the status code that we will get from the status http 400 http underscore 400 bad request, and the details that goes here is like username already registered. Okay, so that means the first part is done. Now I'll say result, the same thing. Let me copy the same thing here, and now I'll say user.email equals to user.email, and I'll say db user by email, and obviously here email, and I'll say email already registered. Okay, so two things done. Two things done. Let's now create a new user and then save the user into database and send response. Now you understand one thing, that I'm writing this business logic into the route itself, but we can move this into a controller as well. That doesn't have to be into this route itself. So now let's say hashed password equals to get hashed password, and it will take user dot password, and we will create this function get hashed password into utils folder. Let's say we create something called auth.py. All auth related things will go into this file. So before we move forward, let's install few things to hash the password. I'll say pip install Python Jose and passlib, I guess. Yeah. So let's install these two dependencies, and I'll say pip freeze into requirements.txt file. Now what I'll do is that we need to write two function, or basically at this point one function, def get password hash. This is what we are using here, get password hash. This will take a password which is in string format and return string. This will use passlib and Python Jose to in combination create a hash from the user's password. So for that we need to create a context. So I'll say from passlib.context import crypt context. Okay, this we will use to generate the hash, and here I'll say pwd context password context equals to crypt context. This will take few arguments like which schemas. So we will use bcrypt, and it also take another argument deprecated equals to, we need to pass it as auto. So we will use this password context to create hash version of original user's password. So I'll say return pwd context dot hash. It has a function called hash. This will take secret. So this secret will be our the password that we want to hash. So let's say secret equals to password. So this will return as hashed version of the password. So let me import this here. Yes. Okay, so this is imported. Now what we will do is that db user equals to a new user where email equals to user.email and password equals to hashed password, username equals to user.username, and we will say db.add db_user. So this will add new user into the database, and we will return db_user. And if you see here, it is a kind of user and we are sending user response. So this user response will be extracted from this, basically this user. Okay, so now this thing is done. We have added our route auth register. So let's use this into our main.py file. For that, what we will do is that we'll say from src.routes import auth underscore, or we can say auth, and this auth has the router. So what I'll do is that I'll say app.include router. I'll say auth.router. Okay, and this will add the router into the application. So what we can do is that very quickly now I'll clear the screen and I'll say python run.py, and yeah, it says pip install pydantic email. So let's do that. Oh, I guess I think I need to write pip install this part email validator, and if we run this application, hopefully no module name utils. Okay, so here we need to import src.utils, and when I save this, hopefully, yeah, so the application is started. Now what we will do is that, or what I'll do is I'll stop it from here. I'll minimize this and I will open new terminal. Okay, and I'll open a new terminal here, and let me move it to the other side of the screen and here. Okay, so I'll first source into it and I'll say python run.py. Okay, now let's register a new user. So this user is not into the database. So when I hit enter, it says none type object as. So let's debug the application. So if we, here select user, it says scalars. I guess my bad, it is scalars. Okay, I guess, yeah. So hopefully if we go to the other side of the screen, you can see it is restarted, and if I click here, hopefully again password is an invalid keyword argument. Yeah, so my bad. it was hashed password. So let's see here one more time. Hopefully this time it says boolean type location is active, input should be valid boolean. Okay, so I have figured out the issue is that I haven't done two things, db.commit and then await db.refresh db_user. When I do this, hopefully, so if I come here, if I say, it says username already exists, and if I try with some other user, it says email exists, and if I try with another email, you can see we have now successfully inserted the user into the database. Now let's work on the other part, which is login. For that, I'll paste a few amount of code and I'll explain it as simply as possible. So we have another route called login, which returns a token, or basically token model. Then I have asynchronous function, which depends on two things: form data, OAuth to password request form. And if you go into this thing, you will see that it has get user name and password, and how you can do it using OAuth to password request form, and it shows all the things here. And you can see here you can get the form data from this thing. Okay, so we get the form data, we again await for the DB, then we will authenticate the user. So for this authenticate part, what we are doing is that we query the database which matches with the username we have provided. If the user is not there, we will return false. Otherwise, if we then verify the password, so the actual password and the hashed password, actual password is coming from this part in the request, and hashed password is coming from the user. So we verify that and we have returned a function. The problem happened was that I have recorded some part, but actually I forgot to hit the record button on OBS. So that's why a few amount of code is already written. And so we have the password context. So we try to verify the password context, and if it doesn't match, we return false. Otherwise, we return the user. So here we check if not user, that means this is false. Then we raise an exception saying that incorrect username or password. Otherwise, if user is authenticated and username and password matches with the entry in database, then we will create access token. For that, first we will create a time delta. That means for how much time you want the access token to be valid. Then we create access token, which takes a data, which is a kind of a dictionary, and it has a key subject. What is our subject? So it is our username, and how much time we want the access token to live is this expire delta. And if we come here, so we will copy the dictionary into 2 encode, and if we check if this expire delta provided or not. If it is provided, use that. Otherwise, use fixed amount, that is 15 minutes. Then into 2 encode, add the expiration thing. So these two things, these two keys, exp and sub, which needed by this Python Jose package, this is we have used, and it takes what to claim, what key you want to use and which algorithm you want to use. So we have that two things, the algorithm HS256 and the secret key, which is our secret key. We are reading it from the environment file, and in order to generate the key we will use open SSL random hex 32. You can, depending on your system, you can use different approaches, or you generate random key from anywhere. The issue here is that on actual production environment, this thing is generated dynamically on the server and you can use it. So nobody has access to this thing. So this is our login function, and when I save it, hopefully we'll go here, and under login part we will provide our body into multi-part form, and when I hit enter, it says incorrect username or password, which is kind of so many things I have tested with. Yeah. So this is kind of a valid username and password, and we have got our access token, and the token type is bearer. And if you want to see what information is into this, we can go to JWT encode, this JWT IO, and if I paste my thing here, you can see the subject is Rajesh 1 and expiration is this time. So you can see that this JWT is not that kind of a secure thing. It's not a security. It doesn't guarantee that nobody is going to encrypt this thing. This thing mean that you only pass non-sensitive information to the to the front end, basically, or to anyone who is interacting with your system. And there are different ways to mitigate this thing. Even you don't show the subject as well, by using a session ID and store it in a cache like Redis, so that you can very fast retrieve those things, and then you only have the session ID. So everybody on internet uses those kind of thing where you only expose the session ID. So now we have our authentication ready, register and login part works very well. Now let's work on bookmarks part. So I'll come here in the bookmarks part, and as I said, I already have written few amount of code, and then I figure out I did not hit the start button. So basically I haven't done anything fancy. We have this router, which is our API router, and we have prefix bookmarks, and we have the home route under bookmarks, which is a post route. This will take a bookmark, DB and current user. I'll show you the schema as well. Bookmark base, which is original URL. Bookmark create, that is inheriting bookmark base, and then bookmark response, which has ID, shortcode, count, created at, and user ID, and these are coming from the model itself. And here is the interesting thing, current user. I have set it as null for just demonstration purpose, and it says that. So this route depends on this thing. So let's say if I somehow write a logic where I get the current logged in user from JWT, then we will have the current user, and if we don't have the current user, we will throw an error. So let's move ahead then. So I'll first create a short code because I want to save a bookmark. That bookmark also take a short code, and I have under utils, I have written a file shortener.py, and it basically generates the unique short code. So let's start working on that. So let's say generate short code, and let's say length equals to 10. Oh, my bad. Length equals to 10. Let's say characters equals to string A and C letters plus string digits. So I'll take all the valid letters and digits as my characters, and what I'll say from what I'll say, let's say short underscore code equals to, I'll join a list which is coming from, let's say, random dot choices, or basically choice characters. So this will choose, randomly some characters from this list, or literals basically. And then what I'll do, for in range of my length. So for I guess this needs to be down here. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that for this much time, run this. Okay. So it will generate a short code, and we will return the short code. Now let's write our async function. Let me copy this from here so we don't misspell it. This will take a database connection which is coming from, we have written it, async session, and this will return a string. This will return a string as well. So by this way we are making sure that the short code doesn't exist on our database. Short underscore code generate short code, and will not pass anything. Let me just very quickly format this well. Okay, so generate short code. Let's say result equals to await db dot execute what you want to execute. Select bookmark, which bookmark you want to select. I want to filter bookmark dot short code equals to the short code generated. So if it exists, then what we'll do, if exists equals to result dot scalars dot first. If it exists, okay, if this thing exists, then what we will do is that we will generate another short code, okay, and return the short code. Otherwise we will return the short code. So I know this logic is not perfect at this point, but we will work with this, but in more robust architecture you need to write this logic in a way that you don't generate a code which is obviously there in database, because this is not the robust logic. But I'll write a comment here, use a robust logic here. Okay, but for time being it generates a short code to us, and and I'll say not from only util, from src.util. So we have the short code. Now let's do one thing. Let's say db underscore bookmark equals to a new bookmark, and I guess I need to import it from bookmarks bookmark. So this bookmark will take a few things, original URL equals to bookmark dot original URL, obviously coming from the database request itself, from the request itself. Then short code, which is our short code, and then user ID, because each bookmark refers to a particular user ID, and this user ID we need to get it from somewhere, and we are getting it from this. We are actually going to get it from the current user, but we haven't returned the logic for that. So let's write a function which basically reads the header file, from where we will pass the access token, decodes that, and generate us our user ID. So let's do that very quickly. Under utils auth.py we have few things. Yeah, this thing, create access token is there. Now let's write another function, async def get underscore current underscore user, and this will take token that will be of type string, and that will depends. So let me import from FastAPI import depends. So this will depend on something which is called a schema, okay, which is kind of a schema. Where is the schema? So the schema is provided by FastAPI as well. So under FastAPI there is a security section from where we will import OAuth 2 password bearer. Okay, this will be kind of a OAuth 2 flow for authentication using bearer token. And if I open this, you'll see the same page again, and it basically says that whatever incoming header coming into the request, okay, extract token from the request, and it will say where it is. So it is under bearer, or it is under authentication. When we will set that, you will understand the thing. So here I'll say that OAuth 2 underscore schema equals to OAuth 2 password bearer, and the token URL is auth/token. Okay, so this is where that should be login. So this basically says that who has generated the token. So we say that this route has generated the token itself. And then what we will do is that under get current user, we will say that we will depend on OAuth 2 schema. We will also need a DB as well, which is our asynchronous session, and which depends on get underscore DB. Get underscore DB is coming from the database, so I'll say from src import src dot database import get DB. Okay, and once we get this thing, we will return user in DB. So where it is, okay, I'll say from src schemas dot user import user in DB. I'm not sure if I have created user in DB or not, so I guess I don't have that, so let's not create that at this moment. We will just use it as simply as possible, and here let's say try, and let's say accept JWT error, and we will at this point pass this, but we will raise the error there. First, let's say my payload, we have JWT, so we will decode the token coming. We will basically not decode, but we will try to decode the token. The key is our secret key, and the algorithm we are using is our algorithm, so we will try to decode the token which is coming here, which basically depends on this, and this thing extracted from the header. So we'll try to see if our token is valid or not. If it is valid, then we will extract a username which is kind of a string, and we will payload dot get, we will say sub. If you remember this thing correctly, under auth, under login, under create access token, we are adding this sub property or key as our username, and that is what we are getting it here. Okay, we try to get the sub property which is our username, and obviously we check if username is basically none. So what we can do is that we can do it here as well. Oh, my bad, none. So we say try to get this, otherwise use this default none. So if it is none, we will raise an exception. Okay, but if it is not that case, then we will say token underscore data equals to token data, where username equals to the username, and we have that in our bookmarks schema. So I'll say from src dot schema dot bookmarks, or not, I guess under user, import token data. So this token data is our token data, and we can use it. So now what we'll see is that, let's say we query our database, get the information from the username, and send it back. So I'll say result equals to await db dot execute what you want to execute, I want to select user. Okay, select user and filter. What I want to filter? User dot username equals to token data dot username. Okay, so if I get this thing, then we can have the username, which can be none as well, and so this can be none as well. So if this can be none, then this can also throw an exception. So I'll put that into try and catch as well. I'll pass it as this point. Okay, and now we can extract the user from this result by saying result dot scalars dot first. Okay, and if user is none, then raise some exception, otherwise return the user. Okay, so now we are raising exception 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So instead of writing it every time, I'll create a variable called let's say credentials exception equals to HTTP exception, which is coming from FastAPI, and it says the status code, which is coming from status, I guess, status, okay, which is coming from this status HTTP underscore 401 unauthorized, and details I'll say could not validate the token. Okay, and we will raise this every time we face an issue. I'll say raise the exception. Okay, and finally raise the exception. Okay, so in any case we are raising an exception saying that, hey, whatever you are doing, we are not able to decode the token. And that means if we come here, so this current user now depends on this thing, get current user coming from src utils. Okay, and we don't need this, I guess. So this user ID will then current user dot ID, and that's why I have used is as none, but I can use it as user, and we can import it from the model itself. So I'll say here from src dot models dot user import user. Yeah, so this user can have the ID, and what we will do is that we'll say db dot add db underscore bookmark await db dot commit and await db dot refresh db underscore bookmark. So we'll refresh that, and we will return the db underscore bookmark. Yeah, so this way we have created our first route under the bookmark section. So let's test this. So I have created a folder already which has this create bookmark, which has this token, and the route is bookmarks, original URL. It has this auth which is set, and I'm sure if you are seeing this, so under the in Postman as well there is a facility to set the environment variables. So I have set base URL and access token. So if we hit this, we'll see not found, because because we haven't added the router into our main file. So under main I'll say we can also call bookmarks as well. Okay, and I'll say app dot include bookmarks dot router. And when I save this, and if we come here, you can see it is reloaded, and if I hit this, yeah, it says could not validate the token because the token I have added has expired. So what I'll do is I'll come here, we have valid body. When we hit enter, we get the access token. I'll copy this, I'll come here, edit this, edit my token, go to create part. My bad, create part, yeah, hit enter, and you can see we have passed the access token, we have passed the original URL, and this is what we have got: a small short code, original URL, ID, visit count, created at, and user ID who has created it. So this is how you can get a route ready that can handle body and insert information into the database. So we have our create route ready. I'll very quickly add two routes. I'll come here, I'll very quickly add two routes because it's a replication of work. Get a list of bookmarks, get a particular bookmark. Okay, so these two things, either we do this way, get current user, or we can write another function, get current active user, which is kind of a replication. So I'll at this point use get current user. Okay, and what we are doing is that we are firing a query into the database. We get the bookmark, and if bookmark is not found, we raise an exception, otherwise we return the bookmark. And here we fire the query and get all the bookmarks because we have all, and this way we can get all the bookmarks and particular bookmarks. So what I'll do is that I'll come here, I have two things ready. This is bookmarks with get, and when we hit enter, we get a particular bookmark. And if I copy the ID of it and go here and hit enter, so obviously bookmark ID not found, but if I write the correct ID, we get the particular bookmark. In the same way, we can write the final part of the bookmark is delete bookmark, and I'll copy paste a few amount of code because we are not doing anything fancy. I'll get rid of this and get current user at this point. So we have a delete route which takes the bookmark ID, fetch the bookmark. If bookmark not found, raise an exception. Otherwise, commit the delete and send a response. Let me import it from FastAPI, and we are not sending any content. We are just sending the status code 204, no content. And let me save this. And if we come here, and if I come here and if I write something, it says bookmark not found, I guess, under delete. We don't need the body, but if I hit enter, it says bookmark not found. But if I, oh my bad, because I need to get the current ID. So this is the current ID, and if I come here and pass the ID, it will say bookmark not found. And if we come here, we did not find any bookmark and no bookmark found, so it is basically deleted from the system. So this way we have this bookmarks and authentication part ready with us. We only now need the last part, which is to write a redirect route, which when someone calls the short code, we will redirect them to the original URL. And before that, I want to show you one interesting thing. If you go to our local address and by providing the route docs, you'll see that our application has beautiful open API thing where you can interact with the API. So for example, in order to interact with health, you don't have to do anything, it is working. But in case you want to go to bookmark, try it out. If you go execute, okay, it will say that not authenticated. And you go here, let's say Rajesh, my bad, it is Rajesh1 ABCD 1 2 3 4. And if we authorize this, you can see we have authenticated. And if I execute this, we actually don't have any bookmark because we have deleted it. But let's very quickly create a bookmark. Okay, example.com, and let's say try it out. Let's copy this URL itself and come here, execute. Yeah, it says we have a short code. So now what we want is to use this short code in this way. Okay, and we will get this short code, find the original URL, and then redirect the user on the original URL. So what I'll do is that under route section, we have this redirect, and let's fill information into the redirect. And I'll very quickly grab a few amount of code because there is nothing fancy we are doing. So we have again a router which has a tag redirect, and it has a get route which awaits the short code, which is a kind of string. We depend on our DB as well. Then we will first execute database statement to get the bookmark. If we don't find the bookmark, we say bookmark not found. But if we find the bookmark, we will basically increment the visit count and we will commit that, and we will redirect the user to original URL. This is kind of a very simple logic. And when we do that, and let's go here and check this thing if it works or not. Yeah, it will not work, and I know you know the reason as well. Under main, we need to call this redirect, and here I'll say app.include redirects dot router. When I save this, and when I come here one more time, and if I refresh this, you'll see we go to the URL, and you can see how fast it is because we have indexed the original URL as well. So I think this is it from my side. I guess there is no new things that I want to explain. Let me think for a bit if I'm missing something or not. Yeah, I guess I'm not missing anything. So I hope this video is helpful to you. You have learned many things from this video. We have built a robust backend application using Python and FastAPI. The application is asynchronous so that it can handle multiple requests at the same time. It has Pydantic models. It has authentication system, and we have understood how the authentication system is working, and I guess that's it. So there are further scopes basically to this work I have shown here. The first is make it more robust. A couple of times we haven't used Pydantic model to annotate the return or any variable, so you can do that. Second, you can write a Docker file and deploy it on a server as well. You can see one of my videos on how to deploy your application, Python application, on server as well. So I hope this gives you confidence in your career, and you can then utilize this knowledge to build your own applications. And if you build your own application by watching my video, please write down comments in the comment section. I'll get back to you. That makes me happy that someone watches my video and learns from the information I share. So if you like the information I'm sharing on my YouTube channel, please share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the life, feel the music. Peace.